Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Landing Your Dream Job, Part 1, Rocking Your Brand. Tonight's webinar is brought to you with the generous support of our friends at Pacific Dental Services. I'd like to remind everyone that you are in listen-only mode and therefore your volume is on mute. So if you would like to ask any questions of our presenter, please type them into the question chat located in your control panel on the right-hand side. Questions will be taken in the order that they are asked, and we would like to save all questions until the end of the presentation, and Dr. Cockrell will address those questions then. And now, I'd like to turn it over to Becky Sorcy with the University Relations team at PDS, who will be moderating tonight's program.
Thank you, Kendra. We're excited to have Dr. Cockrell here tonight to present Landing Your Dream Job, Rocking Your Brand. This program is actually part 1 of a 3-part Landing Your Dream Job series. So for those of you that are attending the ASDA annual session next month, part 2, Rocking the Interview, and part 3, Rocking Your First 6 Months, will be available to you as breakout sessions on Friday, February 23rd and Saturday, February 24th. And we hope you can join us then for those 2 sessions as well. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Cockrell. He's a 2007 graduate of Nova Southeastern University College of Dental Medicine, and he is currently a multiple office owner dentist supported by Pacific Dental Services. Dr. Cockrell teaches and lectures across the country on case acceptance, performance leadership, and debt management. He is co-founder of Brazilian Smiles, a nonprofit medical and dental group, and a member of the American Dental Association, Arizona Dental Association, and Oregon Dental Association. He, his wife, and 3 children live in Phoenix, where he currently practices. Dr. Cockrell?
Thanks, Becky. I sure appreciate that. Is my audio okay? Am I coming through good?
Yes.
I think we're good. All right. Well, as the members, I just want to say good evening. I'm excited to be with you guys and to have some time with you tonight. Webinar format is a little bit different compared to what I typically do with the group engagements. Over the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've had a privilege and an opportunity to engage with a lot of the different universities from coast to coast. And as the student groups are my favorite groups to engage with, just because of the students being intentional and investing effort early on to try to be successful in what they're hoping to do as dentists as you complete your career training. Tonight we've got some time to go over some impactful things and to kind of frame out what I'm hoping to accomplish with you tonight. We're talking about how we're going to hopefully help you guys start to design your success story. And a lot of that starts with how you're going to be able to land your first job when you actually complete your dental training. So we're going to talk about some different ideas and concepts that hopefully give you some unique takeaways that'll be influential and helpful for you. For a lot of you that have had a chance to engage with me in different interactions, you know that I typically start out by trying to better explain who I am to help us hopefully connect on a little different level. The accolades and the introduction that Becky just rambled off for me always sounds neat and impressive when you have somebody else talk about things you're doing or things you've accomplished, so I appreciate that. The more important thing that I generally lead with in all the groups that I interact with is more of a self-definition of who I am. And a more specific way to explain that is embodied by the picture that's on the screen right now. And it comes down to me being a husband and a father. That's the core of who I am. What I do is dentistry. The power behind that, though, is that the bulk of what motivates me to be successful and to strive to accomplish great things in my career as a dentist goes back to my self-definition again of who I am. Everything I strive for comes down to what I try to accomplish for my family, with being able to take care of them, to provide a certain level of work-life balance for myself, to create unique experiences for my family. Dentistry is an amazing career path that can provide a high level of success for any individual that plans things correctly. I grew up in a dental family, just to give you a little bit of background beyond what Becky had shared already. My father practiced in Colorado Springs, Colorado for 42 years, a very successful general practitioner. He developed a very solid, strong reputation in the community there, in large part because of how many years he was actually practicing. It was at an early age that I recognized that I definitely was interested in dentistry, and I wanted to pursue that same career path, hoping to accomplish a lot of what I witnessed and saw him accomplish. But then I also realized once I got into high school that I felt there was a different way that I needed to try to practice dentistry. And I didn't exactly know what that looked like at the time, but I was able to be mature enough and recognize that there was so much my dad had accomplished, but at the same time, there were a lot of limitations with how he was practicing dentistry at the time. I had committed myself to try to find a way to be more entrepreneurial in the way that I might be able to practice the business of dentistry, but also with how I could be a doctor in my community. I recognized my dad had some limitations because of him being the one that technically had to drive the ship to yield all the results for his practice. If he wasn't there, the practice wasn't open. And I recognized that I wanted to innovate a different way to do things. And that's where Pacific Dental Services kind of came into the picture for me. It was my second year of dental school, and I told my dad that I was not going to go into his practice. Most of my friends thought I was crazy. But I wanted to pursue a different avenue of trying to do things. My wife and I had decided that Arizona was the place that we wanted to go to raise our family. So that obviously took us in a different direction from Colorado. But I started to investigate what opportunities might be available in Arizona with different individuals I knew that were already practicing out in the area. So I invested a pretty heavy level of effort on my end for probably 17 or 18 months while I was in school, which was the hard part, to travel out to Arizona, to seek out individuals I could categorize in a certain degree as mentors, to see what they were doing and how they were doing things, to try to then put together my plan of attack for what I was hoping to do when I got done with school. Because after that 17 or 18 months of due diligence on my end, that I got a little frustrated and didn't identify any specific opportunities that seemed to match really well for me. When I stumbled across Pacific Dental Services, I recognized their support platform as something that could give me an opportunity to leverage that platform to accomplish some great things. So you fast forward 11 years later, and lo and behold, it was an engagement that my wife and I decided fit for us, and we've jumped in, and we are definitely drinking the Kool-Aid and running all the way with Pacific Dental Services. They help support my practices, and in all reality, they enable me to do a lot of what I do. But tonight, we're not here to talk about Pacific Dental Services per se. I'm not here to pitch them or their business model specifically. We're here more specifically to talk about what we might be able to provide for you in regards to information that might be beneficial so that you can start to design your own career path for what you're hoping to accomplish. So going back to my story a little bit as we lead into building a personal brand. And what I can tell you is that when I made the decision not to go in with my dad, I realized that I wanted to copy and emulate everything that he had done in his 42 years of practicing, but needed to do it differently, obviously. And I recognized that much of his success came down to the reputation that he built in the community. And as I got to think and look at it more, much of his reputation came down to the character of who he was as a man and a doctor. And a lot of that was based off of the values that he lived by. That in turn also helped him to establish a successful practice culture. The practice culture ultimately is what reinforced what he was able to provide for his patients and his community reputation. So we're going to look at this a little bit and expound more on the idea of brand. And first question I maybe have for everybody to think about is what you actually think of when you hear the word brand. People typically think of things like Starbucks or McDonald's, Nordstrom, maybe Apple or Nike. Those are different successful entities that usually elicit a certain flood of maybe emotional feelings or mental thoughts. You look at Nike, you think of something that's quality and performance related, something that's popular and maybe chic and kind of cool. You look at Apple, you might think of a thriving, profitable company that's technology innovative, obviously. When you look at individuals, though, a brand is something that's pretty different. And if you think about healthcare providers, dentists or doctors, it's something that is even more unique. It's something that's pretty relational if you think about it. Generally, if you hear of a doctor's name, you may or may not associate them with certain mental imagery, but you might more effectively associate with something relational with that person if you've had a chance to actually meet them. As we look at the slide that's up right now, we look at these three different areas of marketing, branding, and advertising. You might ask yourself, how would you explain or define the difference between these different categories? And this is what I've got down, as I can kind of explain from my notes on this that helps the different audiences kind of understand it. Marketing, in one sense, is a personalized activity mix that you constantly put out there so that people always see you. You look at advertising, it's more of a paid, non-personal announcement of you so that people know who you are or know where your office is and what you do. Branding, on the other hand, is how people actually see you based on a collection of experiences they've had with you. So if you go back to what I said just a moment ago, branding for a doctor is something pretty unique. It's pretty relational. Dentists specifically have a unique opportunity in our careers to create unique relationships with the people we help. Doctors in hospital settings have a chance to do it as well, but it's a little different just because of the setting of a hospital. A dental practice is still a more family-oriented environment to a certain degree. If we look a little further here and we go to the next slide to expound a little bit more on what is personal brand, you can see here that we've got the two spheres with these different intersecting areas. Personal brand does come down a lot to how you see yourself, but also how others see you, and it's somewhere in the middle where these come together. They touch on and talk a lot about successful individuals with how they're able to come up with a certain level of self-definition of who they are and what they stand for and what they do. A lot of that comes down to the values of who you are as an individual. And it goes deeper than just who you want to be as a professional. Values will create the type of professional you want and need to be. And this will help you create your personal brand. Defining your brand, if you look at this, it's all about you. You've got the bulk of what constructs your brand being based on values again. Some people may be able to clearly define or list out the values that they have or the things they stand for. For some other people that I've engaged with, though, as we talk about this in regards to defining themselves, coming up with the true self-definition, it's harder for some people to do. And there's a suggestion that I could give you. It might be a little bit of a homework assignment on the side as a takeaway from our engagement tonight. What you could do is actually set aside some time to make a list of the people in your life that you most admire and write down the virtues and values that they most represent to you. This may be in one way for you to recognize the values that you hold in high esteem from the people you look up to around you. With values, if you understand and be your authentic self, your brand should be a reflection of who you are and what you believe in. Otherwise, you would have to try to keep up with an image that's not your own. So it needs to be very authentic to what's important for you. Going back to my self-definition of being a husband and a father, a lot of that for me carries value because it, in one part, illustrates or shows bystanders or people on the side that I'm committed to the relationships I keep. And a lot of the success of a dentist comes down to the relationships we can establish with our patients as we help them with the dental care they need over the course of their lifetime. If we look here a little closer at the other bubble, it talks about your image. It talks about how you determine what you want to be viewed by others and based on your core values. You need to be able to look the parts, basically. Another little homework assignment you could have is you sit back and you reflect on people that you look up to and list out how you identify with them. Do they wear a shirt and tie? Do they wear scrubs? Whatever that might be is something you may want to make notes of, and then try to emulate that as you define yourself and what type of brand you want to put out there. Your vision, you need to be able to create a personal vision statement. A lot of this is very hard to do until you clearly identify your values. They've got a statement, many of the success books that you might read out there, that talks about superior people being absolutely clear about who they are and about what they believe. So that's something you need to take some time to list out or write down as well. You need to be very, very clear on what you're hoping to accomplish. Where do you want to go in your career? Now, you may not have to understand all the steps of where you're going and how to get there, but you should have a big picture idea of what's important for you and stay focused on that. You can't get to where you want to go if you can't articulate it. That's a key thing to understand and remember. This presents significant value to an employer because people who don't know what they want out of their career often end up bouncing from job to job. And what I can tell you is I interview young doctors, the doctors that have more of a big picture idea, even if it's overambitious to a certain degree, I would rather have a doctor over elaborate and expound on what they're hoping to do, even if they don't fully understand what's required to get there. Because that tells me they're motivated, they're focused, they're wanting for something bigger in their life. A mission statement, beyond the vision statement, is something also that requires you to clearly understand your values. It also requires you to understand the vision of where you're going and what you're hoping to accomplish. Once you define a lot of these things, your values, the image you need to portray, once you're able to put more substance to your vision and your mission, this is something you want to be very intentional in sharing with others. And it's important to share that with others because this will draw people to you. As dentists, we've got to look at ourselves not as a product per se, but we need to look at ourselves as an individual that can provide a service. A lot of what we do comes down to trust. If people feel like they can trust us, they'll generally come to us for help. One way that you can build your brand is by going online. This is more of a unique avenue we have available nowadays with social media and different formats on the internet. This beautiful young lady here happens to be my pediatric partner at one of my practices in Phoenix, Arizona. And Dr. Lisa Beanstalk is a prime example of somebody that has exemplified her online brand and presence, a large part with what she does on LinkedIn and other things with our website. But this is a good example of what you can focus on now, even as you're in school, to start to put your identity out there so people get to know you. So much in life and what we do in regards to jobs and opportunities does come down to who you know. And the sooner you can develop an online connection with other individuals, it'll just create momentum for you as you're getting ready to go out into the workforce. So the question is, I guess, how many of you are actually on LinkedIn or have a social media or an online presence? LinkedIn is a great way to start building your network and marketing yourself online because it's very professional in the way that it's constructed. A LinkedIn profile can serve as an online resume for potential employers and recruiters to actually find you. Now, a key thing with this is you want to start with a professional photo. Generally, they'll counsel you to avoid using the same profile photo you may use for Facebook or other social media platforms, so keep that in mind. Your profile should also include some of the elements of your resume. Should identify your credentials, some of your work history, some of your accomplishments, leadership positions you may have held previously, any association memberships, and so forth. I know that Dr. Beanstalk has had a high level of success because of the intentionality that she's invested for our practice with being very identifiable online is one of the top pediatric dentists in North Phoenix. It works well for her, and it's helped the office dramatically. People that come in, they feel like they know her to a certain degree already because of the presence she has online, which is fantastic. The more content you include in your profile online, the easier it'll be for people to find you. You can connect with other dentists and other community groups and other professional groups. That creates a lot of leverage and momentum for you as you pursue your professional aspirations. When you take the branding of yourself from going online to something offline, some people may question what this is or how we would actually define this. A lot of this comes down to your person-to-person networking or your engagements you have with other professionals. And that old saying of a lot of it comes down to who you know is a very, very true statement. You need to invest in relationships with people around you. Going back to when I was in dental school and I made that decision to not going with my dad, I was fortunate, as immature as I might have been at the time, to invest a level of intentionality to seek out certain people I could categorize as mentors at that time in my life. Those people at that time happened to be a group of dentists that were practicing in Arizona, the state that I chose to move to after I got done with dental school. But it was those individuals that I engaged with and flew out to shadow with while I was in dental school. They gave me a lot of experience and knowledge of things I wasn't aware of while I was in school. When I would go out and shadow with them, I'd have a chance to take notes of their environments, to see what they were doing, to see what they were not doing, to get a better feel for what I felt was going to fit for me and my family and my success story that I was hoping to construct for myself. But again, to reemphasize more of what building your brand offline means, I guess my takeaway message for you here would be that it's networking. You need to network with the right people. If you're the most successful person you know, you need to find new friends. There's an old saying that I think Stephen Covey had. So that's something to think about. Look to find people that have achieved what you're hoping to achieve, and those are the people you need to pull close to. Those are the people that you would want to try to emulate. If you don't exactly know what to emulate, that tells you that you need to spend more time with them to ask them better questions so you can get more information to help direct you as you're pursuing your own path of success. One thing I guess we'll touch on here with the networking. As dental students, I want to just really emphasize the importance and influence that you guys have now. You can't ever start too early with going in and shadowing in certain environments. The sooner you get into an environment to start shadowing, the more you learn early on, and it'll help give you better direction as you get closer for graduation. Plus, it'll give you an opportunity to have different opportunities that you can select from. There's far too many dentists, dental students, I should say, that wait until the 11th hour to try to figure things out or put things in motion. Typically, that doesn't work too well. And in one sense, it falls in line with an example I'll give to some of my young doctors that I hire that we call the Niagara effect. And what that analogy is it's as if you throw your canoe in the river, you jump in, but you decide not to take any paddles with you. And you decide to just ride along with the current of the river. And if you do that, you just have to accept the ramifications that you're going to kind of go wherever the river pushes you. But by the time you start to hear the falls ahead, hence the reason for the name of the analogy, the Niagara effect, if you're coming up on Niagara Falls and you can hear the falls ahead, and you try to navigate where you are on the river, it's typically too late. So you have a better opportunity to position yourself for success the earlier you start. So invest in the relationships you have now, or look to create new relationships that you can start to build so that when you get done with your dental education, you'll be ready to jump into the workforce. As you're defining your brand and identifying who you are and what you want, one thing that I always want to emphasize to the groups that I engage with is to never underestimate the benefits of effective communication. This is something that is just crucial to set you up for success. You've got to clearly understand, what you want and where you're going, so you can communicate that to others. If you can't articulate it, you'll have everybody around you confused. The best leaders in life know what they're doing and they know why they're doing it. When you interview for a position or you have aspirations to do something and somebody asks you what you're hoping for, you need to have that clearly thought out so you can give a concise answer. That is the best display that you're organized, that you're intentional, and that you're structured in who you are as a person. If we look at the importance of communication, the one thing that I'll emphasize in a lot of the courses that I teach is helping young professionals, and dentists included, recognize that there's so much more than what's actually said. There's three parts of a message, as we see here, and this is something I have in this presentation specifically because it carries a lot of important information that you need to be aware of and be thinking of. If you look at this and you recognize, holy cow, 60% is body language, 30% is tone of voice, and only 10% comes down to the words you choose. This should help you understand where you need to emphasize more focus on how you present and carry yourself as you're creating a brand. Body language is so powerful. You want to try to maintain positive body language in any situation you can. Strong handshakes, good eye contact, nodding and shaking your head in affirmation of what somebody is saying, positive facial expressions. All of this comes across in a very friendly, interactive way, which is constructive and powerful. A smile doesn't cost you anything, and it's very influential. So always remember that. Tone of voice. The way that you say the words you choose to use is so impactful. You can choose to amplify your energy level that you put out there by choosing to increase the cadence of how you speak, the volume of how you say things. You combine that with positive body language and a smile, and it comes across a totally different way than if you were to talk really slow and look down at the floor and not engage in a real positive manner. So always be aware of that. Maintain good body language, tone of voice. You want to try to emulate the ideal example of who you are. Think about the brand you're trying to create and what you're putting out there. When you look at this and you realize only 10% comes down to the words you choose, it just shows you how important it is that you select and choose very quality words, but then also pay attention to how you actually say those words, something that's very, very important. Nowadays, too, another detail to make note of and be aware of is there's so much correspondence nowadays that's conducted through text messaging and email. And when you look at this and you realize, holy cow, the most impactful part of effective communication is body language, but with email and text messaging, you have no opportunity to show body language. It creates an automatic obstacle for you that you need to be very sensitive to. You need to be even more careful with how you emphasize the vocabulary and the words that you choose to transmit electronically. Make sure that it doesn't come across in a way that it's unintended. So be mindful of that. Focus on these things, and they can help you as you put yourself out there and create your brand. So this slide here touches on, does the brand mirror the experience? What this comes down to, I usually tell my docs to carry themselves in the most professional manner possible that would illustrate what type of clinician they are. Gallup did an interesting research study years ago, I think it was in 2010 or 2011, that interviewed the general population to ask them how they perceived certain healthcare professionals and what type of attire they expected them to wear and what they thought was most appropriate. It was interesting because the research study had shown that the general public expected plastic surgeons to wear a three-piece suit and that the suit should be expensive if the surgeon is good, which is interesting. They showed that the general populace expected chiropractors, for whatever reason, to wear scrubs. As it went down the line and kind of looked at different healthcare providers, they identified that dentists were held in the highest esteem when they had either a white coat on or a shirt and tie. So that's something to be mindful of and think about. One way that you can offset a youthful or inexperienced appearance is by dressing the part. Look professional, be clean cut, have yourself well put together. That in a certain way shows that you take time to be efficient in who you are as a person, and people in large part can then extrapolate that that's going to be what type of a professional or doctor you may be with the type of dental work you provide. So always be mindful of that. Good haircuts, keeping your clothes pressed, being presentable and then looking good. It carries a lot more influence and value than I think many young doctors realize. I've had clinicians in previous years that have worked for me in my offices that have gotten a little bit lax on their personal appearance, and it does not reinforce the culture that we stand behind in the practice for being efficient and proficient and invested in who we are and what we do. Actually had patients even make comments that they felt, and a couple doctors that for whatever reason got lazy and wouldn't iron their clothes, and the patients interpreted that the doctors weren't paying attention to the quality of who they were, and they questioned whether or not the quality of the dental work was good. So it's some things to kind of be aware of and think about. As we take some of these concepts with branding and we look at this in the bigger idea, you need to always be mindful and recognize that personal brand for a doctor in large part is what people think about you. As you try to select and identify what type of brand you want to put out there for people to connect with, be intentional about what you're putting out there. A lot of a dentist's reputation does hinge on what people feel like they can trust. If they feel like a dentist is invested in being loyal to the relationships and the people around them, if they're invested in their community, that builds a certain level of trust that patients will have for coming into that type of practice. If you're well put together, you keep things professional in appearance. If you're balanced and a well-rounded individual, you look at it and you say, okay, are you a spiritual individual? Do you invest efforts to go to church? Are you maintaining a correct focus on your physical health so that you look healthy and look that part? People will interpret that as, well, this individual is family oriented. They're focused on their family and their children. They're focused on their community. They're focused on being spiritually invested. They're focused on being healthy. It's going to all come back in a very positive manner with who you are as a professional, with the brand you're creating for your dental practice. So always be aware of that. You need to build and nurture your brand, or others will define it for you. You can't get lax and think that it's going to uphold itself. You've got to be consistent with the values you stand behind and what you do day in and day out. The last big idea point here is that the experience people have with you is part of the brand. Don't ever underestimate the value of body language and the way that you communicate. That's something that's going to always impact the people you're with. You want to make sure that your team has a very positive experience with you every time you're with them in the practice, because the patients will also feel that. You need to always remember that in general, people remember very little of what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. All very key concepts and ideas that you want to hold to as you're trying to define your personal brand, as you map out what you're hoping to accomplish in your soon-to-be career path. With some of those concepts and things that we just kind of touched on and went through on those slides, we'll kick some time back over to Kendra to see if there's any questions that you may have had or come up with as we went through some of the content.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dr. Cockrell. I'm actually going to ask Becky to remind our viewers and our audience of a couple follow-up sessions that we have coming up at annual sessions. So Becky, will you remind everyone about the part 2 and part 3 coming up next month at annual session?
Yes, thank you so much, Kendra. And first, we would like to thank Dr. Cockrell for taking the time to present this great program tonight. I just want to give a quick reminder to the audience that today's program is actually part 1 of a 3-part Landing Your Dream Job series. So if you liked today's program and want to learn more of the top strategies for landing your dream job, please join us for parts 2 and 3 at the upcoming ASDA annual session. Part 2 will be a breakout session on rocking the interview presented on Friday, February 23rd. And part 3 will be a panel discussion on rocking your first 6 months, presented on Saturday, February 24th. So please join us then as well. And now we'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
Sounds great. So as a reminder, if you guys have any questions for Dr. Cockrell or the PDS team, you can go ahead and enter in those questions on the right-hand side in your control panel, and we'll go ahead and read them off to the team, and we'll answer them in the order that they come in. So we'll go ahead and leave it open for the audience to start sending some questions. And I will let Dr. Cockrell know when the first one comes in. It's always the hardest person to be the first one to type in the question.
Well, one thing to maybe comment on too there, Kendra, is it can be a question that pertains to some of the concepts or the ideas with building your personal brand. If you guys have questions also about PDS or the Pacific Dental platform, feel free to ask those questions as well. At this point, we've got some open time to kind of converse in whatever way it's constructive for you guys. I know sometimes you'll have specific questions for some of the content presented. Other times, a lot of the audiences will have questions on more of the PDS side of things, even though that's not the full intent of tonight's engagement. We can provide the information and help clarify and expound on some of that as well.
So we actually had one come through, and it was about how would you recommend that you would move forward with putting information out on your other social media platforms, such as Instagram, Snapchat, or Facebook, to ensure that your brand aligns with the information you might have on LinkedIn?
That's a good question. I think you need to maintain a lot of continuity with the image you want to put out there. A common pitfall that I'll encounter as I interview young doctors is that they'll try to represent and put out a certain presence on one social media format, but they'll neglect to have continuity with their presence on other social media formats. Whatever you decide is your brand that's important for you to put out there as a professional, you need to recognize that all other social media formats are visible to everybody. And once you post things, it's out there forever. I've actually had doctor candidates that we have chosen not to engage with further because of some non-professional or maybe some erratic past behavior we've seen on other social media posts or things online. So I think to answer that question, try to dig into what is most important for you. How do you want to be identified to be set up for success? What's going to be most constructive for you to solidify an interview? What type of introduction do you want to make now as a dental student in regards to who you're going to soon be as a doctor when you graduate from school? You just have continuity of who you are now, but also who you're going to be when you complete your training.
All right, we actually have another question that came through. Someone is interested in hearing more specifically about how the PDS platform has helped you rock your brand.
Good question. So the Pacific platform, I think the largest way it's helped leverage me in what I do is it's provided me with, I think, a unique landscape of opportunities that I can speak from. My history with my family being so engaged in dental, my brother's an oral surgeon, MD, sister-in-law's a prosthodontist, I got sisters that are hygienists. That carries a certain level of value for me that I can speak from as I kind of define my experiences in the brand that I focus on. But Pacific also has created opportunities for me with being engaged in different practices, engaging with younger doctors in different states, that has given me a chance to represent as a mentor and to try to solidify and stand up for a certain type of culture. My wife and I, we made a very specific decision to practice where we live and we live where we practice. And what I mean by that is you'll come across some doctors that will indicate they they don't want to live in the community where they practice because they don't want to bump into their patients at the grocery store and things like that. That's something that's never really made a lot of sense to me, in large part because growing up, I didn't know any differently. My dad lived where he practiced and practiced where he lived, so I was very used to the daily interactions of going to the grocery store, going to basketball practice, and running into my dad's patients out and about. So that was part of the brand that we wanted to have. We wanted to have something that was identified as very family oriented. Oh, I might have lost audio there. Am I still there?
Yep, you're still there. We can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, my headphones just cut out there. We wanted to identify with something that was very family oriented and committed to our community, to help establish the brand that we wanted. So when I partnered with Pacific, they offered me an opportunity that was about 40 minutes from my home initially. And I chose to engage with that as an associate, but I was real clear to explain to them that my desire was to open practices in my community where I actually lived, with the hope that I could create a type of community reputation like my dad did. He had a certain personal reputation, he had a business reputation, and a community reputation with his dental practice. And that's what my wife and I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to establish as well. My personal brand, if you go back to my self-definition when we first started, even though it might be a little redundant, I have a lot of passion and emotional feeling behind the identity that I have as a husband and a father. And I lead with that very predominantly in all the groups I engage with. And I feel that it has yielded a high level of success for me because people in my community connect with me in that capacity. And I think what it is, if you look at certain professionals, people might find it hard to connect with them unless they've got some type of tie of commonality. So if I can make myself on the same level as the people that I live with in my community, I think it helps. So when they look at Dr. Cockrell and they recognize that I'm a committed father and a husband, I'm at the school activities with my kids, it only reinforces more of what we've tried to put into our practice, and having Pacific help us be identified as a modern, fully comprehensive, family-oriented dental practice. So I guess that's how I'd respond to that question. Long-winded as it was, that's how I'd respond to that.
Thank you so much. So it looks like that might be the end of our questions, but I know that a lot of people typically have questions that maybe they want to save or that they're not quite sure they want to ask in this type of setting. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that they can certainly reach out to Dr. Cockrell and the PDS team following this webinar. And here's the information. And please don't hesitate to do so. The Pacific team is always available for any questions that anyone might have. And to piggyback off of what Becky had said earlier about them being at annual session, their team will not only have the opportunity to present twice during the annual session, they'll also be at the Expo Hall on Thursday afternoon. And on Friday evening, they're hosting one of our more prestigious and welcome celebrations after the Gold Crown Awards and ceremony. So we're really excited to have them at the event. And we thank the PDS team and Dr. Cockrell for taking time this evening to share with us how to rock our brands and be the best possible dentist we can be. So thanks everyone so much again for joining, and look for a follow-up email with this webinar recording and a short survey. And again, we appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much.